It's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics World. Latest post covering finance and property news. And it's Monday again. And of course, Edwin is back for another rant. And of course, the election has now started. Let the games begin.
Let the spin begin, Martin. Let the spin begin. Now, riddle me this, Pat Martin. Which is the better spin? One spun by politicians or one spun by real estate agents?
Well, I think both, you can say, are in fairyland. Once upon a time, let me tell you a story. I've got a bridge to sell you.
Exactly. Let this, the spin has begun, and the weaving, I don't know what it's made of, fairy floss, I imagine. So you just got to remember this, according to the ABC News, you've got to remember that it's official figures, right? It's official figures that both major parties want less migration. And you also have to, you have to remember the following is that if you're going to believe that, Dusty's got a bridge to sell you. I think they've just finished the maintenance on it, so it's been freshly painted.
Yeah, I have to say that there's a lot of stuff flying around at the moment, which is really not based on a lot of good information at all. I was fascinated, of course, that the latest information on immigration and births this is from a demographer, right? Says immigration births both tip to fall. The biggest risk is that undue panic could induce knee-jerk migration cuts that cause migration levels to whipsaw up and down instead of settling back to a more stable level, they said. And it's also worth highlighting that departures were up more recently, that we still had 380,000 people coming in over the last 12 months, and the fertility rate was also down. So there's an interesting point there. But the good news is average lifespan for a male is 82.1 years. For women, it's 85.9 years. But hey, it's down a little bit. But my point is that all of this is spin, 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 right? There's a lot of political spin. Of course, everybody is tackling the numbers or trying to tackle numbers. But I thought this was the most interesting piece on this. This is actually showing you not the just the natural increase by the capital cities. This is basically from the ABS 23-24, but also the internal migration, so the moves. And you can see here that overseas migration was really strong, especially into Sydney and Melbourne, which is one of the reasons why there's pressure on prices. But the internal migration, so this is people already in the country moving, and you can see there that Brisbane and Perth were the migration magnets from an internal perspective. And you can also see there that the natural increase that's due to natural births and what have you is still relatively low. So I think this analysis probably tells you a better story, really.
Yeah, look, this is and what we've been raising over and over again, and how the government policies, the state government policies. And also you could say the town planning policies with the LGAs have really made people reconsider where they go to, where they move, and whether they go abroad, whether they stay, whether they're coming or going, and that interstate migration. But at the end of the day, Martin, what I think the reality, and by the time that the mainstream pick up on the figures, or these people that are putting these graphs and charts together. I feel, and we believe that as I said, the government policies, the state government policies, have driven a lot of property investors out of Melbourne. Melbourne's being left behind by far. They are because of the local and state level policies. The taxes, the imposts put on investors, and those imposts aren't really just on your residential property investments. Let's not forget that it's a lot of super funds, a lot of investors by way of super funds, by way of yeah, commercial fund managers and the like. Also hold a lot of industrial and warehousing properties as investment under investment portfolios as well as individuals. So and those went up in by huge numbers, by 140, 160 percent, and those costs are transferred onto the leaseholder because they've got to pay the outgoings. So that is driving small industry, whatever's left of it, driving it away from Melbourne. So I think overall, you might get the migration into Melbourne itself, Melbourne itself, but in general, the from the rest of those that want to live and can afford to live closer to the CBD because of its because of its historical being historically being a trendy place to live in and somewhat a little bit more affordable than Sydney. But at the end of the day, I think that the New South Wales is a huge recipient of the of migration from abroad and from interstate because of the 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 state policies that allow small industry to continue to operate so far, fingers crossed. And it's a very desirable destination for people from abroad, and hence the reason why the Sydney market pretty much stands on its own, and it's not a one-trick pony. It's it's various topics, various it has various magnets that attract people from interstate and abroad. So the Sydney market, yeah, it really pretty much stands on, and we can see that by the numbers that we share from week to week.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll look at the numbers in more detail a bit later, but I just wanted to share this particular clip here. This is from Julie Hare and making the point, quote, Dutton's cuts to migration are not a game changer. And they're quoting here Alan Gamlin, a professor at the Australian National University. The temporary migration is almost impossible to cap because it's demand driven. And interestingly, of course, Julie Hare's accusing Dutton of conflating temporary and permanent migration to criticise Labor's immigration track record. And the other point of this little point here is that even though net overseas migration is falling by 100,000 per annum during the election campaign, we may be led to believe that very high levels of migration between the middle of 2022 and the middle of 24 will continue because of alleged mismanagement. So a bit of spin here, left, right, and centre. Of course, this is very much predicated on the academic view that big Australia is good for everybody. I'm not convinced by that. The other interesting observation is that one reason why net migration can fall slowly is that once the people are here, they're delaying their departures either by hopping to new visas or applying for bridging visas as a last resort to extend their stay. And if you link the temporary visas, students, and visa hopping together, that for me is where the focus should be, I think, rather than just the permanent migration numbers. And and I know that the back doors are still wide open.
Yeah, and this is what we've been saying all along: is the numbers that we get given, they're not the real story. They're not the real deal. It is spin because in reality, as you said, or even that article points out, is that they transition from one visa to the next and start seeking asylum. And the student visa, the pathways from a student visa to permanent residency was made a lot easier. It has been made a lot easier over the years, which we broke that story many years ago as to when the immigration department changed the tenure of those the years that you could stay post your graduate degrees, and all that was really a pathway into permanent residency. It's a lot easier to, as you said, to transition from one visa to the next, and then you've got you've got the people from all over the world that come over here with even with tourist visas temporary tourist visas, and they then seek asylum. There's hundreds of thousands of applications or visa holders transitioning under different categories. And there's a huge backlog in the Administrative Decisions Tribunal, as we shared not long ago. And this is where as I've been saying for a while now on the show, and that is that all you need to do is it's smoke and mirrors, because all you need to do is change the name of the visa, change the number of the visa, and shebang, you've got a different pathway. We spoke about how they diluted the medical pathways to incorporate even masseurs, and also those that masseurs that give you happy endings. So all sorts of shenanigans that go on. But look, this is, I'm Dusty and myself and what we've been reading, what she's been mainly reading, because of her background in the with immigration departments and the legal eagles that she's worked with over the years, that she's that they've very very much convinced, whether it's the Libs or whether it's the Labs that take the helm post the election, we will see a pathway, or the reintroduction of the golden visa, the golden parachute to come into Australia, the golden ticket, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be there because small business operators and small business are dwindling away, and you need new blood. As you say in the game, right? You need new blood. You need new investors. You need new people with that have that will bring money. The question is going to be, Martin, is it going to be worth $5 million like the one that Trump put out? Is it going to be worth $10 million? Dusty believes it's going to be in the tune between $10 and $15 million, and most of it's going to go into a Build Australia fund, discretionary fund that the government can use out well. And hey, and there you have it, because small, medium enterprises are absolutely being decimated by all the spin. So that's from a political realm, as how it affects the marketing, how it affects the renters, how it affects wannabe property owners, the forever renters, as now being called, and the never buyers of property, as they're starting to be labelled across different social media platforms. That's one way, and the other spin that we're getting more and more of when the industry seems to be in a little bit of trouble is, of course, the spin from within the industry itself, where you have to be watchful and careful as to when you turn up to auctions and see if you've got NCBs. This is a travesty, and you just have to look at the patterns and the way that things are performed, the performance on the day of many auctioneers and many auction campaigns as to what happens on the day. And you only have to, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that 1 + 1 = 2. When you start going through the proceedings, how the auctions are being conducted, what happens at the end. Look, I'm not saying that this particular property, there was an NCB. I can't be 100% sure. I didn't speak with the auctioneer directly about it. I didn't speak to the agent. This is just Dusty's and my observation, because we attended the auction on Saturday. But it look, as I put in the post, if it looks, smells, and quacks, like a duck, you know the rest of the story.
Well, it's sort of a lot of it around. I had a couple of people send me messages after our last show when we were talking about dummy bidders, and it does seem to be quite widespread. As you say, it's hard sometimes to spot it, but there's something quite weird going on, along, I think, the road there with many auctions. I mean, you got to say that the story of property at the moment is quite interesting. So, for example, there was this article that said that mortgage holders and hopeful home buyers have been warned against banking on interest rate cuts. Just over 2,900 homes went under the auction since late October. Only 2/3 found an owner. as clearance rates slipped for a fifth week in a row. Paul Bloxham from the HSBC suggests that don't expect another cut soon, or indeed a major boost to prices. Most economists perhaps say no change on Tuesday. The RBA, of course, is meeting today and tomorrow. Bear in mind, of course, it's the new committee now. So, and it's interesting there that there's a few people saying, well, maybe there will be a cut or not. But Louis Christopher, I think, has got his finger on the pulse. Federal election will impact buyer decision making over the coming weeks, despite housing policy being not yet emerging as a key campaign issue. I think it will definitely become a more critical issue to go forward. But the fact is that uncertainty is going to be there in the next few weeks in the market. And by the way, Goldman, of course, is saying there's a solid case for the RBA to front load easing cycle. And so they're supporting the case possibly for a rate cut tomorrow. So we'll see. And the old maverick Christopher Joy is saying that, with a helpful kick from the Reserve Bank, he thinks that expectation is that there will be continued recovery in the housing conditions and it'll gather pace. So all of those things are in the background. My perspective is simply this, that there is a level of uncertainty created by the election. There's a level of uncertainty created by the pressure on households and the fact that rates are still quite high. And, there was this article that said, well, you had to pray for a pay rise because even with rate cuts, home buyers will need another $15,000 a year to keep up with higher prices. This is Homes Sydney seekers will need that $15,000. That's according to a finder.com.au research analysis. And it's quite clear to me that there are still significant pressure on households. And, the politicians are sort of playing some lip service to the pressures on households, et cetera, but only really quite superficially. And I'm sure you saw this. This was actually at a prezzo when somebody asked a question that nobody wanted to ask, or at least the journalist didn't want to ask. So here's my footage from this morning where I got the chance to ask Albo the kind of question those so-called journalists are too afraid to ask. Australia's been subject to decades of economic and social decline. So it is interesting, isn't it? And as you said, this could well be a very critical clip when we look back at the election.
Look, it is, in my opinion, it's going to be, I truly believe that this is going to be potentially be the deciding, the one that really woke people up. But if we have a rate cut tomorrow, it's going to change change perspectives. But look, it's interesting. It's interesting, from the point of view of whether is there going to be a rate cut tomorrow or not. I don't think it really. It's whether there is or whether whether there is or whether there isn't. I personally don't believe the RBA are going to put put the foot in it and take sides per se, because if they do cut the rate, it'll be like taking sides, and it's going to be one of those situations where they don't want to have that on their on the resume, moving forward. But whether there is a rate cut or whether there isn't a rate cut, or the rates stay the same. It's horses for courses when you start looking at property. And again, this is just our backyard, the Sydney region. When you start looking at what is selling, what is fetching a higher price, what type of properties, and the locations, and what type of marketing campaigns, how they've been presented, and I'm talking apart from the from the dud campaigns of price on the low to watch it go. I'm talking about serious campaigns, and why are certain properties achieving higher values than like property, let's say 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and others aren't. I mean, it's all comes down to the individual property in the areas when you start looking at it from a very, very granular point of view. And this is where a lot of our followers understand this. but a lot of a lot of the ones that follow a lot of people that follow the mainstream don't understand it. They just go by the broad brushstroke of property values going up or property values going down. And that's why they walk away scratching their heads, not knowing what happened to them when they attend auctions, when they're trying to buy a property or even sell the property, because it happens both ways. But look, I would like it to be. I would like it to the deciding vote. I would like it to be, policy around housing. I would like it to be, and when you start talking about housing, obviously it's going to be immigration, but we know that they're not going to cut the immigration back. And the unfortunate thing, Martin, is I've said on another post, is I don't believe that the deciding vote, as much as I would like it to be around those core issues, because from there stems the issues with the state of the state of affairs and the living crisis that many are experiencing, right? Fundamentally, rents doubled in some parts of Sydney, if not tripled, within a matter of months. Within a matter of 12 months, 18 months, which was absolutely left people gobsmacked and left people on there pretty much on couch hopping, and bed hopping and garage hopping, so. But I still feel that it's going to both parties, because both don't want to really pull back on immigration as what the nation would like to to make us believe that will be. I think it's going to be cloaked, and we're going to get a hell of a lot more green policy. We're going to get a lot more around green policy, around other issues, global issues that we 26 million people, in the southern part of the globe, are meant to be are meant to be fixing for the rest of the world. And that's, to me, that's the sad part. That I think it's going to be primarily on the that green ideology, and other ideologies, funding forever wars globally, and that, and we stay in the demise that we're in, and we're going to be in it for the next 5 to 10 years, because immigration has to continue to come in. Different visa pathways will be introduced. And as I said, because we need that dollar, we need that investment, because internally we are literally being eaten alive by the political decisions that our illustrious leaders are putting us through.
Well, you make a very interesting point here, and there's a couple of perspectives which is worth just reflecting on. I think this particular post really was quite fascinating from Jessica. You're probably doing much better than you think. Only 20% of Australians earn over $100,000. About 6% of Australians live paycheck to paycheck. The average credit card balance is more than $3,300. And the average first home buyer is a couple and is now aged 36. If you go back a decade, it was in their 20s. So that's a sort of the first stake in the ground. And that's really, worth just contextual. And that's why when I look at my mortgage and financial stress and rental stress analysis, I try and highlight these very important issues. Not everybody's got significant income, significant wealth, significant property, and etc. It's just not like that. And you've actually also taken the thinking a little bit further, and you've said that the 4 offensive attacks on the cost of living, not 5, 4. Well, you can see them there. You take us through them if you'd like, Edwin. But there is a 5th as well.
Yeah, look, it's how to conquer a nation, right? It's really how to conquer a nation, how to destroy a nation, a society, a group of people. You come at them from north, south, east, and west. In the old Spanish, was, you have the 5th pillar, the 5th pillar from within. Obviously, so after after watching Oz Integrity video that was posted there with regards to what we know was the COVID money printing. The speaker there in that interview was talking about the money COVID printing, net zero pursuits. They're the ideologies that I feel is going to be very, we're going to see a lot more focus very soon to persuade the forever renters or the never home buyers to win their vote because they if they can't either be going to be forever renters or for never home buyers they've got to hang their hat somewhere. So they get the political parties are going to try and get them to hang their hat on these ideologies. But whether you vote for the libs or the labs, the ideology doesn't differ that much, right? So then you got the net zero pursuits. Number three, the attack that we've got was obviously government migration, immigration policy. That's going to continue. The number four, which we've seen more strongly over the last decade, has been selling the rights of our industry and resources to overseas interests. I mean, absolutely gobsmacking, decisions that the governments have made of both persuasions. But the fifth element is conquer the nation or conquer the people from within. And this is my fifth column of destruction is self-destruction from within, where we end up with wolves in sheep's clothing governing our nation. They're not interested in the people because if they were really truly interested in the people, if they were truly interested in us as a nation, there'll be a lot more consideration taken. And you can see that they're not really interested in the battler. You can see that they're not interested in just the individuals that just want to have a home, a roof over their head, whether it be a rental, Martin, or whether it be an owner, a principal place of residence as an owner occupier, as I said, as a home buyer. They're not really interested. Why? Because you can see it in their own lifestyles. When you start talking about politicians, feathering their nests with, in some cases, in most cases, from having 4 to 7 investment properties, and then trying to tell you to leave to live moderately so that you can afford a home to live in, so that you can afford your rent. I mean, yeah, it's do as I say, not as I do. And then when you start seeing all the expenditure that goes abroad, and nothing is held within, and you start making these ridiculous deals with the offshore groups that one would think are truly governing our nation, as opposed to our own politicians that we elected to have a fair and equitable state of affairs. But they seem to be dictated by individuals and organizations that we didn't even elect and don't know who's really behind them with all these fanciful ideas. As I said earlier on, that 26 million people are going to be housing what 3.5 billion people. We're going to be producing the homes for and saving the rest of the world. We're going to reduce our emissions. Our energy costs are going to go through the roof. And yet, when you start looking very closely at our emissions percentage in comparison to the rest of the world, but it's just an upside down world, Martin. Hence the reason why I put that post up, because it's really if the first four could be resolved over time, but the fifth one is just entrenched. And last but not least, of course, is the fact within the fifth column is also politicians feathering the nest, because the tenure is only short before they get a lifelong pension. And how many politicians are still living off the taxpayers' dollars, with a lifetime pension, and they're moonlighting as boards of directors post their retirement and getting it from both ways, and they're not getting not copying the tax on the pension because that's set in concrete, right?
Yes. Well, they live in a separate, exclusive world where everything is shiny and lovely. The reality for many people is that they're not. But I do think it's interesting that the gas issue has sort of bubbled up to the surface. I don't know whether you saw this, but the other day the Australian Institute showed the Rex Patrick and Jackie Lambie stopped by their big gas billboard truck to say a few words. Big gas is, quote, taking the piss. And of course, now we've got Dutton talking about gas reservation. It's fascinating to me that this gas issue finally has bubbled to the surface. Of course, we don't know what the policies will be or could be, but this is a good example where finally, perhaps, possibly, we're going to get some changes of thinking with regard to how we actually think about energy. Energy is a critical issue, and I would argue that one of the reasons why the cost of living is so high is because the energy policy has been way off key for a long, long time. And, we are still exporting the bulk, 80% or so of the gas that Australia produces goes overseas. And we're talking about re-importing that gas back to Australia, particularly into the southern states. So the idea of reserving more for Australians. But of course, if you don't do it, the reservation strategy right, all you end up doing is effectively locking in those high prices. So there's a lot to think about here to make sure that the policy can actually work right. And just to be really, really clear, the reason this is so critical is because, of course, the budget showed we've got a structural budget deficit. And into the medium term, that budget deficit will continue. And part of the reason why it will continue is because of high energy costs, because high energy costs flow into absolutely everything. So it does make sense to try and find a path to significantly lower energy costs. And look, Australia should be like Kuwait, right? Kuwait produces oil, and oil in Kuwait's really, really cheap. But in Australia, our gas price, which is by the way above the cap that the Labor government sort of half imposed, is driven by the international price of gas, and so it's actually about those people who are again leveraging the story for their own benefits internationally rather than actually for Australians and Australia. And for me, energy is just a critical issue that it makes a whole lot of sense to try and talk about. Now, of course, let's face it, the last budget was about cost of living and, back in the red, as the mug said. I thought it was a lovely cartoon from the Australian there. Or indeed, this one I thought was quite good, the tax cuts and run to the polls. But the point is that the tax cuts are almost worth, very little later in the piece. But of course, it'll be superficially attractive. But I hope that there is actually more proper debate about some of these critical issues that you've touched on and we're touching on now, because there are really, really some very major issues out there. And, what about the grocery giants? Jim Chalmers is talking about the issue of competition. And of course, there's now a discussion about who's going to break them up and are they going to break up the grocery giants. May I make the point that that's a really important discussion, but of course it's the banks who have the Australian economy by the throat. They are probably 10 times as bad as the major retailers, and yet nobody wants to touch the banks because they're just too big, which is a real big problem. So to my mind, the tyranny of the banks is something that should be spoken about. But I just want to make one point, which I think is quite interesting. I don't know whether you saw my post yesterday, but there is a discussion which we should be having about taxing unrealized gains, because in the budget last week, it was clear that Labor is still pushing on with its idea of taxing unrealized gains, particularly in the superannuation sector. So just to be clear, normally, capital gains occurs when you buy an asset, hold an asset, and then when you sell it. And when you sell it, potentially there's a gain and then you get taxed at that. But now they're talking about taxing unrealized gains, and of course it's in the superannuation system over $3 million. But my point is, once you start that slippery slope of taxing unrealized gains, then it's too easy for politicians to say, oh, what about other personal savings, or what in the family home? This is something which we need to really have a debate about. And again, so far, I haven't seen it discussed once in any of the campaign issues. For me, this is a really, really big one. And then the other context of all of this, of course, is what the political discussion in Australia is the international discussion, and tariffs in particular. I made a show a couple of days ago talking about what I called market disorder as Pax Americana unwinds. And, the consequences are very clear. This is actually the US market on Friday. You can see the sea of red there. And that was because of the tariffs, of course, particularly relating to cars. But now, of course, later in the week, we're going to get the full Monty, as it were, on the Liberation Day, or T-Day, as some people have called it, in the US. Now, that, again, is going to have a consequences. And I do feel a bit like the local election campaign is like we're in a little lifeboat, right? And we're trying to have a little fight in the lifeboat, but we're on a very, very choppy ocean. And this choppy ocean, particularly from the US, means that actually we're not careful. We could very well tip out of the lifeboat and find ourselves swimming in a rather angry sea. And that, for me, is another important context. And again, I don't see a lot of real focus on that, but there should be.
Yeah, look, on the 2 points, the gas and the taxes, right? Uh, People don't really realize. People aren't realizing what this whole uh, ideological change from gas to electricity is really doing for prices of goods. I mean, the politicians are talking about, or Albo, the labs are talking about um, the price gouging and how they're going to investigate it again for the eighth time. And at the end of the day, it comes back to transport costs. It comes back to all to do with energy and the forever increasing costs of transportation and energy and everything around it. But coming back to what the Monday Evening Rants is about, obviously it's all about property. Look at what's happened with the gas policy in Victoria, right? That should send alarm bells to anybody that's look, and I call it the way it is, right? They should send alarm bells ringing for anybody that's thinking about voting for any government that's going to continue to squeeze the gas industry even more and wean us off gas altogether. With exorbitant price that holds an investment property, because look at how they basically the WeChat chatters and other groups dump the properties because they know that in particular areas where the demographics they cook with gas. And they look for properties with gas stoves, with gas heating. I mean, that's just the in the nature. And what the governments are trying to do is change a whole global ideology around gas to these cultures. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So you've got this, and then you've got the infrastructure costs of reintroducing electricity, as we spoke about in the show early last year, where reintroducing electricity into the old buildings and upgrading the mains from the street, from the street poles to the buildings. The cost that's going to incur to all the buildings that the old, for example, the old red brick apartment blocks and the old yellow brick apartment blocks, the majority of them are struggling as it is right now, because when they were built the electrical with an electrical circuit that would cater for one power switch in the two bedrooms, a light switch, and a power to an electric to an old electric stove, those upright stoves, and basically a power outlet in the lounge room, and then you've got your lights, which is pretty much all up is about 33 amps. So 33 to 36 amps. And then when you've got the new induction cooktops that pull 32 to 33 amps, that's just one cooktop, and that's all you got coming into your unit. On top of that, I can assure you that 99% of apartments in these old buildings don't have one power switch, one GPO to the each bedroom. They probably have two. They've also got ceiling fans, and they've got split system air conditioning units, and they've got range hoods, and they've got everything else. I mean, the circuit's so overloaded where our electricians have pulled cables through the old cables from the conduit in between the brickwork in the walls in order to upgrade the units, the boards, for safety reasons. And the cables, the old cables, just crumble away, Martin, as you're pulling them out, because because they're being so worn out with the heat from overloading the circuit. So you've got this infrastructure spend that people aren't aware of what's coming around the corner. Transitioning from gas to full electricity, and then the push for electric vehicles, which I think it's going to be die a death very soon. But then you've got to upgrade all these buildings. You've got to upgrade your circuits, your mains again, to, in some cases, go from single phase to three phase, to be able to charge your vehicle at home. And then what do you do with the apartment blocks, right? So this is this is what the politicians don't really think about post making these ideological decisions, because of new green deals, build back betters, and transitioning from here to there, and being a slave to all these organizations abroad that are pushing this shit on us, right? And that's the cost. We end up paying for that, and then it's translated into rental increases. It's translated into cost of construction, increased cost of construction. It translates into increased cost of to buy a home. It puts a lot of pressure, and then you stop building, because it's just fundamentally you've got to have rocks in your head to build new, if you're thinking from 2-3 years ago. Cost, I mean, everything's, it's a moving scale upwards every month. So that's from you're transitioning from your gas to electricity, and these ideological pushes. And yet we are one of the richest nations with gas deposits in the world, right? So this is what we got. Going back to the other point that you raised, Martin, with taxes. So we've got income tax, we've got fuel tax, we've got vehicle registration tax, stamp duty, payroll tax, land tax, capital gains tax, fringe benefits tax, Medicare levies, council rates. Now you're going to have future taxes on your super or shares or whatever. I mean, I reckon I'm going to be alive to witness politicians start pushing through. They're going to tax you on ideas and thoughts, business ideas and thoughts that you might have, or you might dream about before you even initiate them. They're going to tax you on that. They're going to tax you on how many kids you have. They're going to tax you if it's a boy, if it's a girl, how many kids you're going to have, because that's just the nature of it, right? So they're already putting people away in imprisoning people around the world for standing outside buildings, meditating, or some call it meditating, others call it praying, keeping to themselves, and they're locking them up and fining them. I'm telling you, there's going to be a tax on your thoughts. So don't think about any ideas, or don't think about any investments that you're going to make, because whether you do it or whether you don't, as soon as you have that thought, you're going to be taxed on it. So
Well, I think,
that's a crazy world we live in, man.
yeah, well, let's just take it one stage further. Of course, the most obvious thing to tax is air, right? So, you've chosen to breathe today, so we're going to tax you on the amount of air that you've actually breathed. I think that'll be the obvious end point, because we are getting to the point, and it's not just Australia, but Australia is actually very much at the forefront of this, where there is a desperate grab for any way to try and actually get a little bit more revenue through the front door so that governments can throw it out the back door, firstly to the big corporates who are actually getting huge amount of money from governments for no real return. I mean, most of the big gas energy companies, for example, pay no tax, just to be clear, and that's because of the policies that are in place. And of course, we've got these big commitments for the defence budget, AUKUS, which I have big question marks in my mind about. And then we have this issue of, as you say, the energy transition, which is hugely complex. And it's interesting if you look at, for example, the UK. The UK has gone very much down for the renewables, and they've closed all of the coal-powered stations. Energy prices are very high in the UK. We're relying on gas to an extent. But what they're doing now is they're making a huge investment in putting up more big pylons to be able to ship the renewable energy from offshore plants, big propellers on sticks, basically, to be able to bring that onshore. And they're now talking about potentially discounting the electricity for people who are close to the pylons. You have an amenity problem, so we'll actually, your electricity will be a little cheaper. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So the fact is that we've got huge question marks in the UK about the energy strategy that's been rolled out. Meantime, energy prices are very, very high. And very interestingly, I was doing some analysis the other day, and a lot of the costs aren't actually for the source of the energy, but it's actually incurred via the management processes that are actually in place at the moment. So the whole structure of the way that energy pricing works, and it's linked to gas prices, for example, is completely flawed. But again, I don't see any real aspiration from either side of politics here in the UK or indeed in Australia to really have these more fundamental debates. It's all about quick fixes, and it's about little levers here, which aren't going to solve anything. And the bottom line is we'll end up paying more and more and more, because governments don't spend wisely. They spend either to support their cronies, and as you mentioned earlier on, many, of course, ex-politicians end up as directors in some of these companies later. Funny that. Or indeed, they just don't care, and they just feather their own nests. And by the way, it's interesting, going back to that discussion about unrealized gains, interestingly, the government pension scheme would be exempt from it, which is another example of one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
Martin, let me ask you. Let me ask you something. And Dusty and I were talking about it over the weekend, and it's all to do with gas because I've got colleagues in the industry that are in the commercial real estate and retail side of real estate, and they're finding it more and more difficult to find to accommodate small business operators that run pizza shops and small restaurants that basically run that their operation is very, very much highly run on gas. So you've got your pizza shops. You're very, very costly to run a pizza oven. I don't think you can run a pizza oven on an electric pizza oven without going broke within the first 3 months. And this was the conversations that I've been having with some of my colleagues, somewhat 2-3 months ago, and as we were attending the auctions on Saturday and going, coffee shop hopping from one auction to the other, and doing our pit stops in between, that conversation came about. So if that is something that I can see a real fundamental change in your small hubs where you've got your little restaurants, or you've got your small village shopping centers. If this no gas policies come into play sooner than later, they're going to be affected. And obviously, then house prices and potentially could be affected. What's going to happen to the shop that become vacant? unrentable, what do you do with them? Yeah, some would say, oh, well, you turn them into residential accommodation. Well, that may be true, but they also provide somewhat some infrastructure into the local community, because you can usually around a coffee shop or a pizza shop or a Chinese restaurant or any hot food takeaway place that's relies on gas, then you get a small medical center, then you get I used to call it the old milk bar, but you get a convenience store or a news agency. And you start building these little communities, which is what we really were all about in decades gone by. So uh, my conspiracy hack comes on, and is it a way to really do away with all these and corral everybody into your big shopping centers? So that's my observation and the discussion that I had on Saturday with Dusty. But my question to you, Martin, is because you're sort of your neck of the woods is so far ahead. Have you seen these, or have you had a chance? Have you driven around? Have you observed, or do you know of small shopping villages that would have these takeaway shops, eateries that would rely on gas? Have you seen them sort of close down and become next to nothing, or what's the general trend? What have you observed?
Closure. Yes, absolutely. So if you go to some of the towns in and around the UK, those central areas that used to be the hub of the town,
Yeah.
that shops have closed, and some of the big ones like Woolworths, for example, in the UK, gone. WH Smith about to close, but also a lot of smaller places, and it's the same in Australia because I survey SMEs in Australia. The big pressures are the energy costs and business rates. And in both cases, it's uneconomic to run a small business. You simply can't do it. And, whilst you can put your prices up to an extent, there's a limit to what people can and are willing to pay for things, And in many cases, the costs of just trying to run the business have got to the point where it's impossible. So what's happening is that there are some establishments that can sort of crowd in. Betting shops, for example, well, they're really useful to have, aren't they, in the middle of town? Not. You might find the occasional, big takeaway, McDonald's of this world, but they're actually in some cases now withdrawing rather than expanding. And so what you're seeing is that the central businesses in that local area, in the small towns, are just completely going. And as you say, in some cases, they'd be converted back to residential accommodation. But the heart of villages and towns are dying. And what it means is that you then have to go somewhere. If you need to go to a shopping centre, you have to drive. And guess what? There's very little public transport, particularly buses, which means that many people now have to have multiple cars to be able to get around, to be able to go to the big shopping centres to do their shopping. So what it is doing is it's just squeezing the life out of so many communities. And I see precisely the same in Australia, particularly in some of the regional areas where, of course, the banks have gone and, even post offices are closing in some areas, and small businesses are again closing. We have lost the plot here in terms of what a vibrant economy actually looks like. A vibrant economy is not based on just a small number of very large organizations, through which we are being forced to pay through the nose to use, supermarkets and banks being two examples. We've absolutely lost the plot. And the point I'd make is that the social consequences of this doesn't happen just overnight, but if you look back over 20 or 30 years, you can see the desolation.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And what you end up there with is, well, maybe you have more property, but, the property doesn't have many amenities. And that's a big problem. But I think the other interesting observation is in some parts of the UK now, there are areas where people don't want to buy because the infrastructure isn't there. There's no schools, there's no doctor's surgeries, there's no pub, there's no shop. So you've actually got these areas where there are no facilities at all. And that's precisely the same that's happening in some regional areas. And there are stories of some regional communities across Australia just closing down. And a concentration, of course, of the population in the major centres, where, of course, we don't have enough properties, where prices are still going higher. Now, this is call it a conspiracy theory or call it just, a consequence of bad policy, but it's creating a population concentration in smaller areas. 50-minute cities, people will say, well, maybe not. But this is not good policy. It's not good social outcomes. And I actually don't understand how we've let it happen, but we have.
And that's a problem. And this is the changing face of real estate again, because we're a property show, and this is the changing face. And this changes prices. This changes for the better or for the worse. And then when you've got a change in prices, then you've got also as you said, and then areas become no-go areas. Look at how many houses are for sale in Melbourne, in the fringes of Melbourne, and the no-go. So why aren't the renters? Why aren't the all the Greens members that were whinging and bitching and carrying on about housing, housing affordability? There's a lot of affordable housing, and from the latest figures on who's leading the charge that we're going to show is apartment prices are starting to drop again in Victoria, and house prices continue sort of on a steady trend, but nobody's why? Because, like you said, Martin, whether it be in England, whether it be in regional areas of Australia, in towns where you take away the pub, take away the infrastructure, take away the schooling, take away the medical, take away the banking, and you've got no town. We go back to Slim Dusty song, a pub with no beer. It's basically a town with no pub. Is no town at all. It's just a mirage. So yeah, and that is the sad and unfortunate path that we're going to. But who's going to wake the politicians? Who's going to wake the major parties? I feel that from a housing point of view, as much as there are many the libertarians, the whatever else's that have come up, the One Nations, the trumpeters, the musketeers, and everybody else. The independents are too fragmented, and they're not. The unfortunate thing, as much as they want to change, if only there could be some sort of a vision to pull them together, and I feel that could be. They could sway and persuade the coalitions of the Liberal Party and the coalition of the Labor Party that sort of are both spruiking or not spruiking, that is going to form a coalition with the Greens. But outside of that, Martin, the sad thing is things moving forward, if there aren't more independents to control and to have a bigger say than what we've had over the last 3-4 years, 6, 7, 8 years. Things are only going to continue to get worse, sadly.
Well, it's interesting. I made a show with Tarek Brooker last Friday. We started from the budget and went on from there, and we ended up talking about precisely this issue. And the fact is that the political system at the moment doesn't work very effectively for ordinary people. And, there are big stories, of course, of bad policy decisions taken for a long time. And, okay, it's compulsory voting in Australia, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we actually end up with good outcomes. So there is a real question mark about how this is going to play out. And I do think it's really important through the campaign that some of these deeper questions about the nature of society, and the access to property and the ability to be able to actually have somewhere safe to live and all of those things. These are really critical issues that need to be discussed, and that policies need to be clearly articulated. And I worry.
How dare you ask those questions, Martin? How dare you ask those questions? Now, you conspiracy theorist, you troublemaking Nazi, that's right-wing nut job. You ask real questions from the grassroots level, and they shit their pants. They don't know what to say. They
But
go, they're dumbfounded because they're not scripted questions given to the mainstream, to us. We're bought and sold, Martin, unfortunately. But what can we do other than what can we do?
Well, I think very important. What I would say is that the mainstream media don't ask the hard questions, and we need to force them to do that. I think it's part of the process. And hey, these shows perhaps will help. Oh, and talking about, we should be amazed. I just want to cut across to a little bit of a breaking news item. Did you see this, Edwin? Kamala Harris is speaking at IREC 25. Can you believe it? The real estate agents are at it again.
I know it's a time that was, that will continue to be, and will always amaze, and real estate forever. And I don't know, Matt. I don't know I really don't know what to make of it. I started thinking of all sorts of headlines for Eric to send to Tom and John McGrath. I think that they headed off. I mean, one of my headlines was going to be laughing your way into a property listing, or cackling your way into a property listing. I don't know. I could go. You could have a lot of
It's
fun with it.
it's a parallel universe, Edwin. It's a parallel universe.
Yeah,
Now,
but why not? Look, if you're going to invite a politician from the US, right? Invite the one that's made it in real estate. Do a 5 minute, 10 minute video, satellite conferencing appearance with the man himself, right? That's at the helm, and it's built. Thousands of the trigger off of the US. Yeah, I know. I was done for. I thought it was a joke when I first saw this post on X. I really thought it was a joke, and then I went to the actual ARIC website, and it is what it is. Like I said, so I don't know. I don't know.
I just couldn't figure it out. As you say, not particularly well known for her real estate portfolio and strategies and all those things. But I suppose a name is a name is a name, which shows you that maybe we're more stupid than we thought we were. We're actually lifted by the name more than anything else. Now, you did mention, and we should just go back to that because that we've actually again been tracking the Sydney and Melbourne median home and apartment value tracker, and fascinating to see that the story is still very much the same. But if you look at the housing count, 1140 houses for sale in Sydney under $1 million, right? And then if you actually look at it here on the 24th, and that's when the 2% deposit scheme was announced, 1101, and then now 1084. So what do you conclude from this little story?
Look, it's a trend. It's been obviously we've taken out two other posts, two other dates, 2 other weeks that we had up there on our live count of the homes that are advertised in the Sydney region by way of domain under $1 million, and it's a downward trend. It is a downward trend, and it's because the many reasons. I dare say it's going to pick up a bit more momentum. So when it breaks the 1,000, but again, Martin, it's although there's a lot of misleading and deceptive bait advertising going on with a large portion of these homes. I feel that the true figures are anywhere between 4 and 600 in real terms of homes in the Sydney region under $1 million, and that should be a story in itself. What we've been discussing for a while, that in itself should be a story as to the disappearance of that price bracket, and it's only just holding on in comparison to the demand. I've noticed that some of these listings that have come up, I don't know how they've done it, but some of the listings, because I sort of go through them very quickly at a glance, but I've also noticed more and more listings from outside of the Sydney region, the sort of somehow they're pulling them into the Sydney region. The yeah, the sort of got listings from I saw a couple from the mountains quite a lot, from Blackheath as well, which is pretty much outside of the actual Sydney region as per domain. But yeah, here we go. So it's interesting. We're about to break according to the domain numbers, we're about to break the thousand barrier. Um, but it's sad to see, Martin. There should be a hell of a lot more listed. And again, also in here, it's not just freestanding homes that are incorporated in this, that agents incorporate in this. You'll find a mix of some agents put in apartments. You've also got townhouses, but the freestanding home, uh, the great Australian dream, the great Aussie dream, to own a freestanding home with a backyard that you can play cricket, hit a cricket ball, play tip footy, whatever. It's just dwindling away before our eyes.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And it is worth, I think, just underscoring. We're talking here about under $1 million in the Greater Sydney region, right? And I'd also make the point that actually, if you look at the mix of property that's there's a lot of dogs, there's a lot of stuff that actually needs a lot of work, and probably a lot of defects that need to be fixed. We'll come on to defects shortly. And it is worth comparing. So this is the under a million, 1,084. If you look at the total Sydney numbers for the 24th, 21,127. On the 31st, 20,654. So there's a lot of property, but you can see there a lot of apartments, a lot of townhouses, that includes land as well. So there's something quite strange when there's such a small proportion of accessible housing, other than, of course, if you want to go and buy one of those high-rise units, which is going to cost you an arm and a leg in strata fees later.
Yeah, and in some parts, the developers have got to sell them and I'm talking about the West on average, anywhere between 1 to 1.2 million dollars, which we raised on the what old mate Chris Minks was going on about out at Schofield and beyond of that new development there, and it was beating his chest about how wonderful the Labor Party were. And we start looking at the cost of those apartments there. A one-bedroom apartment started at 675 or thereabouts, to a two-bedroom at around 850 to 950, and a three-bedroom above the 1.2 in the middle of freaking nowhere. Out in Whoop Whoop, and to commute into the city, you're commuting for an hour and a half. And traffic down Windsor Road is an absolute nightmare still. It has been for the last 3 decades, and will continue to be for the next 2 decades before they fix the bloody thing. Mm. So it's getting as we said, it's getting a lot. You try to move further afield, but it's costly, and you got to juggle that sacrifice of commuting by public transport that's forever breaking down, forever running late, and if it's not breaking down and it's not running late, they're in some form of strike or disagreement with the state government because they want more more wages to blow the whistles whilst they're standing on a carriage. I don't know, just one of those things.
Well, just on that, you see, this is Waverley Council. They paid $8.55 million, which was $1.4 million above the reserve, for a block of 6 flats in Bondi for affordable housing, right? These are 2-bedroom apartments from the 1940s, and in 2020, there were $5.75 million. So just think about that. This is Waverley Council buying up 6 flats, but think about what that means in terms of what the value of those flats actually are. This is crazy prices. I mean, I don't understand how this can be even contemplated. But there you go. That's what's going on. And it shows you that we are so away from where we need to be with regards to property that it makes it very, very difficult for ordinary people. And, I said earlier on, a lot of people are leaving Sydney. Well, the reason they're leaving Sydney is they can't find anywhere to live. And, the property market is pretty much broken. Although it is worth noting, of course, that if you look at the listings compared with last year, they are actually still higher. And I think that's also quite interesting in itself. And it shows you that the question marks with regard to the property market are still there. But again, it's very important to tease the granularity out, because these top level aggregate numbers don't tell you the full story.
No, 100%. And then you've got the Melbourne market, which is another beast of it on its own, where last week we had 28,688 properties on the market, and most of them being freestanding homes that somehow these first-time buyers down there don't want to buy, because again, the issues with demographics in the outer regions, the type of properties, and the list goes on. And as of today, there's 28,098. So there hasn't been a big drop. The numbers are still high, and have been relatively high for a while.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of people claiming that the Melbourne market was resurrecting and was magically going to, take off. I'm not seeing it in any of the data that I've got. And what I also make the point is that a lot of the properties still are ex-investment properties that are coming on the market because investors are no longer actually able to make it work for them, thanks partly to the policies down in Victoria. And so I think that's going to play out. It's worth looking at Brisbane just to complete the picture. So on the 24th, 3,974. A week later, 3,925. So, very little change. But interestingly, also, if you look at the auction story, it's definitely getting a bit slacker, isn't it? I guess the election will continue to reinforce that trend.
Yeah, and people look. The numbers aren't that high. And we are. Well, I think we're finally starting to get into the colder weeks where people are going to start, a little bit late in pulling things off market and staying off market until the spring. But from the different charts and the different numbers that we've been sharing, we're starting to see a bit of a pullback now. But yeah, look, overall, the numbers are still there. For those that want to follow auction clearance rates, one thing for sure is going back to well presented, well marketed, well priced position properties will sell, and there are still people on the sidelines, willing, ready, and able to buy, and they are making a very big distinction between those that aren't renovated to those that are renovated, and albeit, regardless of whether the renovation is good, as long as it's clean up and looks clean, livable, and somewhat polished up, there's a lot of people still jumping in many parts of Sydney. Some areas, of course, have sort of hit a peak, and I don't think we're going to see a change in those markets, those higher markets, anytime soon. Not until we start getting not until whoever takes the helm starts saying, okay, now I can really release what I want to do with the immigration policies moving forward.
We'll see about that. And it's worth highlighting that there's still quite a high number of transactions that are going through without mortgage finance. So people still have cash. That's really quite interesting. And I've seen a bit of an evidence of that through a couple of one-on-one conversations where people had significant cash available and decided that now was a good time to plow in. Just in terms of the rental markets, just before we close, last week, 10,368 in Sydney, 10,183 the following week on the 31st. And then in Melbourne, 10,857 compared with 10,594. So slight moves, but nothing significant. But what I also still see is a lot of people are getting the rents that they're currently paying being jacked up again. So the advertised rents don't tell the full story of what's going on in the rental market, right? Because people are actually worried about not wanting to move from where they're currently renting. And so they're just agreeing to pay an increase again. So that is not falling through to the full statistics, in my view, which is one of the reasons why we've got a big difference between the advertised rents, which maybe are going up, maybe going down in places, and the true rents, which of course are coming through in some of the other numbers.
Look, you hit the nail on the head. The cost to move, it's enormous.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you can find anywhere, and that's the point. Again, my one-on-one conversations, I've had a number of renters saying, we don't know what to do. We really don't know what to do, because if we stay where we are, we're going to actually incur another 10% rent increase. If we decide to move, we've got to find somewhere else to rent. It's really tough to find somewhere else to rent, and we're going to have to pay more because the prices are still higher. And if we think about buying a property, then we're actually finding it really difficult to find anything that we can afford unless we go a long way out, and that then puts huge costs on us. And of course, as you say, even if you do move, the costs of moving around are actually very significant, which sort of quite neatly takes us to your tip for the week. And well, if you want some sexy pictures for those in the property market, the next 3 slides will be for you.
Yeah. So this is one of our builders went to do, was called out to check out on a dampness in the wall adjoining to the bathroom, and obviously he worked out that it was there was moisture in the cavity, in the skin between the villa board, and the tiles and the gyprock in the other room. Now the owner of the property decided to put this through the insurance, but after the demolishing part of the walls, and the insurance assessor came out to look at the claim, and he said, "No, we're not going to pay because this isn't accidental. This is bad management, bad maintenance." He called it. So they didn't. The lady didn't get an insurance payout. So we're helping her out with the bathroom renovation, and it's interesting. So I was talking to the builder today, and I said, what's your opinion?" He said if there's no, we couldn't work out any, trying to work out where the leak, if where the leaks is. But this is mold, Martin. This is he said in his words, this is what's caused this is an accumulation of mold, and there's bad ventilation, moisture coming in between the cavity, and bad management. He said obviously the lady should have called somebody out earlier when she started getting mold spores appearing years ago on the gyprock on the adjoining from the adjoining bedroom, but they didn't, and they just let it go. But it's incredible. These pictures I was gobsmacked by when I saw these pictures. So the tip of the week. The tip of the week is if there are signs. Obviously, the first thing that you should be doing is, if you haven't done it for years, is get a plumber to pressure test the pipes. They have ways of testing and giving you an idea if there is a small leak in between, from the joints in between the walls. That they can work it out. Obviously, then if you can also get somebody to test get a moisture meter, a good moisture meter, not the cheap ones that you get from Bunnings for a couple of $100, but you have to get somebody with a good moisture meter to really check it, not the ones that before you bid or before you buy inspectors use. Get a real one. So you have to check the moisture, but even then, obviously, and try to get under the house as well. Look, the the last thing that if you're really concerned. I always say to people that it's easier to do an intrusive check if there's issue, particularly if there's mold coming out on the gyprock side of the adjoining room to the bathroom. You just do an intrusive investigation by cutting a hole through the gyprock. It's easier to patch gyprock on a wall than it is to cut through a tile or break through the vanity or whatever. So if you've got access to do that, and then put small cameras in. So there are different ways you can do it to save yourself the cost of what's now going to cost the poor old girl $35,000 to fix up because the insurance won't cover it. So simple checks. The first one is the water pressure test that plumbers can do. Then signs of moisture or mold, or even the walls. You may go past the wall and you might feel like the wall getting a bit cold on the adjoining wall to the bathroom. Then you just, obviously it's a matter of troubleshooting depending how far you want to go. But doing the bathroom renovations these days can be very, very costly.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting in the property I had at Thurul, which was built by a builder, and was well constructed. I actually had a leak in a water pipe that was actually in the wall. And the first signs were actually water appearing as mold in the window below, because it was at first floor level and it was actually below. And so I got immediately, as soon as I saw it, I thought, right, we need to get this checked out. And I sort of got somebody to come and take it. Now, I was very lucky because the outside of my property was tin. So he was literally able to take the tin off, right? And there it was. But we had to replace a couple of pieces of the timber that had actually, gone all moldy and horrible. And it was a relatively minor repair. And we had a bit of a battle with the insurance company. But they said, well, you probably wouldn't have noticed it because of until you actually saw the water. But the point is, be alert. Keep an eye on the, if there's moisture there. Why is there moisture there? It hasn't rained recently, or keep an eye on the damp, and don't let it just sit there, because the problem is this gets worse with time. It doesn't improve with time, right? And so quite often what I see with, again, from my building inspector days, people said, well, I'd known that for 2 or 3 years, but didn't know anything about it. Well, of course, that's the problem. If you leave it, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, the insurance company can turn around and say, well, actually, you didn't do your maintenance, because the problem with as I've said before, a house is a machine, right? And a machine needs maintenance. And that means that there is work to be done just to keep the property running smoothly and effectively, and keep an eye out for faults. Edwin, appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground, but some very important points there. And I guess as the election campaign goes on, we'll be able to continue to bring some interesting thoughts to our viewers over the next few weeks. So I look forward to that. We'll see you next week.
All the best, Martin. You take care.
Cheers.